welcome to another Green Thumb lecture series. My name is John Schaefer, and I'm with the Harris County Public Library. And joining me today will be a member of the Harris County Master Gardeners Association for a very special presentation and discussion. We are here online the third Tuesday of every month at 11 a.m. So set your calendars now. That's right, the third Tuesday of the month at 11 a.m. Today's topic is edible landscaping, which we're very excited about. And before I introduce our presenter, I just want to go over a couple of things. One is we love questions. As a matter of fact, this presenter absolutely loves your questions. So please, as we're going through the presentation, type those into your Facebook or your YouTube or your comment box, wherever you're watching, and we'll be getting to those as we go throughout the presentation. We'll also have a recorded version of this online, so you can always come back and refer to it later. And second of all, I want to talk about our next show, which will be April 16th. It'll be Gardening in Containers, and that's with Lynette Freeman, also with the Harris County Master Gardeners. So we're very excited about that one as well. So let's get this ready to go here. Our presenter is Benny Matusik, who was born in Houston. He grew up in Deer Park and graduated from Deer Park High School, and then he went to the University of Houston, so he knows Houston. He's been a Harris County Master Gardener since 2020, and he really wants to know how much food one suburban home can produce without alerting the local homeowners association. And I love that. We've already talked about that. And his specific interests are aquaponics, permaculture, and what this evening's dinner will include from his backyard garden. Benny, it's good to see you again. How are you?
I'm doing great, John. I appreciate you having me. You know, I was telling the group yesterday, my wife is limited to only, 30 minutes each evening of talking about gardening. Anytime I mention something about gardening, she picks up her phone and she calls Siri, Siri, set a timer. Well, I start to tell her about my day. Wife, I planted some corn. Siri, set a timer. Wife, I saw some wildflowers next to the school. Your students might like to see them. Siri, set a timer.
Well, her loss is our gain, and we had a really good response with our program. I think it was 2 months ago when you talked about aquaponics. Everybody loved that. So, and I know this is kind of maybe a little bit related. I know we've also got an awful lot to do, so I'm going to go ahead and get your presentation up here ready to go. And just a reminder, once again, everybody, please, as we're going, Benny loves questions, so just type those into your chat box, and I will relay them to him. We also have Harris County Master Gardeners monitoring the chat as we go, so they will be also providing links and answers as we go as well. So, Benny, without further ado, let's get to it. It's all yours.
Thank you very much. Again, appreciate you having me. As mentioned, this presentation is for you, so please chat your questions as we go. We have some master gardeners that are helping today, and they're able to answer a lot of the questions. If we have a question that they can't answer, or perhaps it pertains to something specifically that I did, John will kind of gather those up and break in. But I do know if you wait till the end of the presentation, you kind of forget what you were asking, why you were asking it, and what have you. So please ask your questions as we go. Also remember that there's Ask a Master Gardener online. You can go and you can Google, Harris County Master Gardeners, Ask a Master Gardener. And you can send any questions that you've got, along with pictures even. Your plant doesn't feel good, you have some funny bugs. What is your fruit tree doing? You can submit questions not just here, but there as well. And hey, we're all unpaid volunteers. We're doing this to help you. So let us know what you need. Help us help you. And we hope this will be good for all. Please remember that this is not the only talk. Green Thumb has a lot of really good talks throughout the year. Things about, fruit trees, growing bulbs, heirlooms, collecting seeds, and what have you. So lots of places to learn. You can Google, Harris County Master Gardener Green Thumb and get this calendar and mark those on your calendar. In addition, there's a demonstration garden, the Genoa Friendship Garden. If you think of Beltway 8 as being like a clock, it's right on the kind of 5 o'clock mark of the Beltway, just a hair inside the Beltway. It's really nice to go out there. A lot of the volunteers kind of have areas that they own, areas that they enjoy, and they do special things out there. Also, demonstration beds are planted for a lot of veggies. So it's nice to go out there, number one, just see what they're doing. Number two, kind of compare your garden. If you're into tomatoes, what, have they planted yet? How do their tomatoes look compared to your tomatoes? Just a very nice yardstick that will help you grow. And as we grow, let's stop and, hey, we got to talk about your yard. So, American yards, when you stop and think about it, it absolutely makes no sense. You have this house on a piece of land, and land is tremendously expensive. I don't know if you've looked at land online lately, but even, small lots can go for 70 grand or more. You put a house there, with the front yard, but, the front yard, all it does is cost you property taxes. You gotta, either mow it or pay the lawn guys to mow it. It's going to want weed and feed. It's nothing but a big hassle. I mean, in the end, you can't eat grass. So, why do you have a front yard out there? Same thing with the backyard. You got to mow it, you got to weed it, you got to do some stuff. Kids don't play outside anymore. So, why does the average American home even have grass? So if you were to just really stop and just kind of rethink, I mean, if you could, I understand you've already got a home. We're not going to knock it down or anything like that. But if you could stop and just rethink what we do with our homes, how would your home be shaped? Where would it be on the property? How would your property be allocated? What would you use your property for? If you really wanted it to be wonderful and, be productive and cost effective, what would you do? And so that kind of gets us to the topic of today, which is really more than edible landscaping, but edible landscaping is kind of the kickoff point. I mean, if you could really stop and make your garden be anything that you wanted it to be, just what would it be? How would you use your front yard? Would there be a deck with shade? Would you grow food? The same thing with the backyard. Would there be a gathering area? Just what would you do? And again, we're so constrained by what we expect yards to be. We kind of just go along with, whatever was there in the house, when we got it, we don't really change things a whole lot. At least most people don't. But if you could really stop and just wipe away the constraints of culture and what have you, the constraints of, what Americans typically do, what would your dream garden be like? Your dream yard be like? I mean, yes, we want it to be beautiful. We're talking about landscaping. We don't want ugly landscaping. We want it to be beautiful. We would want things to be edible as much as possible to be edible. Again, why do we grow all these things and trim them and mow them and cut them? And they're kind of good for nothing other than looks. Medicinal, if you're into that kind of thing. I know my mom, she grows a lot of echinacea and what have you. She kind of enjoys her medicinals. Resources as well. I've got some, bamboo in one corner of the yard that I grow, and I use that as stakes whenever I'm planting things in the rest of the yard. If I need, my jalapeno plant's fallen over, I can go cut a piece of bamboo and there's my stake. So resources, wildlife, if you want more birds, squirrels, whatever you want, there's ways to invite them. And again, we really want this to be maintenance free. This whole thing where you got to mow your grass, and once spring really starts rolling, you're probably mowing it weekly, sometimes even more. We don't want that. We don't want to be, replanting bunches of things in the spring. We don't want to be mowing a lot of grass. So it's just something that's as maintenance free as possible. And we want to create a place that you want to be. Right? This should be like your sanctuary. This should be a place that you want to go sit and just enjoy the green, enjoy the flowers, enjoy the butterflies, a place that's going to soothe your soul and just make you feel better. So let's try to wipe away some of the preconceptions of American landscapes, and let's talk about how we can make something more useful, more productive, and specifically edible. Now, usually when we start talking about these kind of things, people, they automatically shift into permaculture, or people ask me, is this permaculture? And, yes and no. Yes, and that we're going to steal as many ideas from permaculture as we can, because permaculture is very big about, productivity and utility and, keeping maintenance low and what have you. But one thing that permaculture typically doesn't talk about is aesthetics. You know, in all the books I've gone through and all the permaculture chat groups I'm in, when I was working on my permaculture certificate with, Oregon State University, aesthetics were really never brought up. It was all about how much can you grow, how well you can use your water, but again, because we're talking about landscaping, right? Edible landscaping, you're going to want something that looks nice. You're going to want something that HOA is not going to harass you about. And so that aesthetic is something that kind of falls outside of permaculture. We could probably sit and argue about that a little bit, but let's roll with that today. So yes, we want to steal as many ideas from permaculture as we can, but let's kind of keep that aesthetic in mind as we go, because again, this is our house and we want it to look nice. Now, again, permaculture is a much larger idea, and it takes a very holistic view of just everything that you do in your life. Your transportation, your clothing, your house, how it was built, what will be, happen to it someday when you tear it down. Let's focus just on edible landscaping today, and perhaps we can talk about permaculture some other time. Again, that's a bigger topic. I don't think that we have time for that today. But we do want to steal some of those guiding principles, right? We don't want to do this thing where, and I remember years ago doing this. I remember going to Lowe's or Houston Garden Center, whatever it was. And, my wife and I were kind of landscaping the front yard, and we picked out a bunch of things that looked nice, and then we brought them home, and we tried to kind of, piece them together, kind of let's arrange them 3 or 4 times, and let's agree, and let's put them in the ground. It looked great, but, none of those plants did anything for me whatsoever. And, as a gardener, I've kind of gone through these stages where I used to walk out and look at my garden and, how does my garden look? Yeah, it looks pretty good. That's great. And then kind of stage 2, I would go out to my garden and, every single plant, does it look as good as it should? Is it producing as well as it should? Is there, more sun, less sun? Do I need to move it to another place? Just really just maximizing plant by plant. And then kind of stage 3, I got a point where, what are these plants doing for me? I put a lot of work into these things. Is it stuff my mom passed along to me because she thought it was interesting, or something I picked up somewhere because it had a nice bloom, the wife liked it? Every single one of these plants, if it's not going to bloom, or if I can't eat it or what have you, then why is it here? And so the last couple of years, I've been really kind of thinning out. I shouldn't say thinning out, because my yard is swarming with plants, but there are plants that have not made the cut. And we really want to kind of have some guiding principles that will help us in that same direction. So number 1, you need to have a plan. What are you trying to do? Do you want to have a kitchen garden where you can have herbs, go out there and get some herbs and spices for your stir fries and what have you? Do you want things that bloom? Are you, a big flower nut? You just want as much color in your yard as possible? Nothing wrong with that whatsoever, but let's be clear what your goals are. Do you want to, grow things you like to eat? And as we, reach towards this goal again, we want to minimize maintenance. This thing where spring rolls around and everybody heads to the garden centers and they all buy all these plants. Why are we doing that? A lot of these edible plants will survive a freeze. Perhaps, in the spring, you kind of, chop off the dead tops, but that stuff will sprout back. I think that something like, Swiss chard is a great example. The top froze during the winter, but the roots are still down there. Chop the top off and it'll come back on its own. No more buying plants, replacing plants, planting new plants. Not if we don't have to. We'll never get that maintenance to 0, but let's see what we can do. So as we kind of work on picking out plants that are going to be good for our goal and low maintenance, we got to position them. And pretty much a good way to go at this is to position, your larger items first and then smaller items next. And usually that means, trees first and then, bushes and smaller plants next. Root crops, if you're doing edible landscaping, a lot of, anything from radish, turnips, onions, and what have you. You don't want to plant those in this mean Texas clay, this black Texas clay, because it's hard to get them back out without destroying them. So if you do have some raised beds of some sort, whether they're raised garden beds or raised flower beds, and in general, as a guiding principle, root crops want to go in your raised beds with the softer soil. Non-root crops can go outside those raised beds. And then, of course, we want to use maybe flowers and herbs as fillers. So we're not just going to run wild. We're not going to just start with a big blank page and, hey, somebody spew some creativity. We've got some guiding principles, and hopefully those will help guide us as we go, choosing the right plants and putting them in the right spots. Now, there's a couple different ways to go at this. Actually, I should perhaps pause for 2 seconds. John, do we have any questions that we want to answer? Are we doing okay?
We're doing good. Everybody seemed to love the Willy Wonka analogy, and I think we're kind of in the right headspace now of creating a fantasy land for our yard. So we're all good right now.
Well, that's a fantasy land that I want to make real. I think that we all deserve to have an absolutely wonderful garden. What we need to do is stop and think about, what is that wonderful garden and how do we get there? And towards getting there, there's a couple different approaches that you can do. We can take the simple approach. You've probably got some place that you live. You've probably got some landscaping already. So I'm not asking you to go and rip out all your landscaping. So one thing that you can do is start mixing edibles into your landscaping. And of course, the Harris County Master Gardeners, really make this easy for you. And in fact, I guess to back up just a hair, there's basically 3 laws of gardening that really kind of cover everything that you need to know. And basically it is, plant the right things, plant them in the right place and plant them at the right time. Now, planting the right things, there's no point in trying to grow things here in Texas that just don't want to be here. Either the summers are too hot for them or, the winters are too cold for them. On the right-hand side, there's a vegetable planting, some suggested vegetable planting dates from Harris County Master Gardeners. It's very easy to take some of these items and mix them into your landscaping. And they've shown you, well, what are the right things? Well, they're right there. They're listed down the left-hand side of the sheet. Plant them in the right place. Let's come back to that in just a second. Plant them at the right time. Again, the sheet shows you exactly when these items should be planted. Both for, spring, summer, and fall. For planting things in the right place, that's going to kind of depend on kind of how your yard works, right? It's going to depend on sun and moisture. And if you make a list of things that you like to eat, right? There's no point in growing things that you don't like to eat. Again, that's just wasted work. So if you make a list of the things that you like to eat, and if you kind of put them on a little chart, I've got moisture, on the left-hand side, and I've got sun across the top, you can kind of see how plants would like to be grouped. And so if you have a spot, over by the air conditioner where there tends to be a lot of shade, tends to be a lot of moisture, well, what plants are moist and like shade? Ginger, mizuna, mustard, parsley, things like that. Those are things that would love to be in your landscaping in that part of the yard. If you have something, full sun, if you have a spot that's full sun and dry and you'd like to mix in some edibles there, well, what are some of your full sun dry items? Lavender, oregano, rosemary, sage, and thyme. They would love to be there. And of course, that's going to require that you be a little bit conscious as to how the sun works around your house, right? Everybody knows the sun comes up in the east and sets in the west, but we've got to put a little bit more thought into it. When the sun comes up in the east, even in the summer, it's that early morning sun, that golden sun. Plants just love it. Usually there's still some coolness from the night, so the plants aren't being cooked. But that they can get that morning sun, and the plants are so happy. Usually by about noon, the sun is moving around to the south side of the house, and it's warming up quite a bit. So that's going to be a full sun area on the south side of your house. And then as the sun goes off to the west, you're getting in the heat of the day. 3 o'clock, everything is really hot, and usually it's just hot all the way down to sunset. So usually the west side of your house gets cooked. That's usually the drier side of your house, the side that gets that hot sun. And of course, we've got to have some kind of watering. We can, put our moist plants in moist places and dry plants in dry places. But like this past summer was just mean. I think we went something like nearly 3 months with basically no rain at all. I remember my lawn, the grass, when the San Augustine grass gets that kind of grayish green look, it's in distress. Wow, that's a long, hot, dry summer. So at some point you're going to have to water. There are lots of ways to do it. I'm a big soaker hose fan. I've tried drip hoses and what have you and just wasn't impressed. I'm a big soaker hose fan. And then sometimes I'll touch up, just with a water hose and a hand wand as well.
Benny, we had a great comment come in from Suzanne on Facebook talking about how she's had some success with her HOA, talking about some of these edible plants and as water wise. So I wonder if you could just maybe elaborate on that a little bit, how some of these plants might be more a good selling point to the HOA.
Yes. Yeah, it sounds like number one, I'm just not a big fan of HOAs. My HOA, we specifically have a requirement. There is expressly no edible gardening of any type in your front yard. And when they say front yard, that basically if they can see it from the street, then they're unhappy and they'll send you a letter. Now, with that said, what they don't know won't hurt them, and it seems like there's a lot that they don't know. I was doing some gardening on the side of the house. And they sent me a letter about it. And I called the lady and said, hey, this is not, I lied like a dog. I'm sorry to admit this, but I told her that's a rose bush I got from my grandmother. It has sentimental value. Never heard back from again. So clearly they don't know the difference between long beans and rose bushes. So HOAs don't tend to be gardeners, but they don't tend to be real friendly either. But this is not a bad list here. Any of your Mediterranean herbs are going to, do wonderfully in, full sun and dry. So again, anything in that rightmost column is going to be good with full sun. Anything starting with chamomile going on down is going to be, decent in dry spots. And then like lavender, oregano, rosemary, sage, and thyme, rosemary especially, it is amazing, how long they'll last. Without any real attention in a dry spot. So if you want to go to your HOA and even recommend plants that they could suggest for edible landscaping that will be very water wise, that's a pretty good list to start with right there.
Well, you're getting tons of thumbs up right now. So apparently you are not alone in your distaste for HOAs. We'll let you keep going. That's a different subject.
I'll buy you a beer sometime. We'll grinch about HOAs.
There you go.
Back to watering, I did want to say one thing you don't want to do is top water your plants. A lot of people, they'll either go out with a sprinkler or a sprayer or something, and they, sprinkle water right on top of the plants. And they think, oh, it's just like rain. Look, the plants are so happy. They love it. Yeah, the plants love it, but, bugs love it too. If you've ever ordered like ladybugs or praying mantises for your garden as a natural pest control, read the instructions. What do? You pour the bugs at the bottom of the plant, and then you spray the plants with water, and having the plants wet invites the bugs up into the plants. And that's what you're supposed to do. Well, it not only invites ladybugs and praying mantises up into your plants, it invites all the bad bugs as well. So yes, everybody thinks, oh, it's just like rain. Yeah, it's just like rain, but you're inviting those bugs up in there. Always bottom water, whether it's a soaker hose or a watering can, whatever you do, water them at the base and kind of water the soil around the plant as opposed to putting water on the plant. So these are actually all fairly straightforward gardening things that we've talked about in a lot of the classes. This is an easy start. Again, those 3 laws of gardening: plant the right things in the right place at the right time, and then pretty much don't kill them. But let's stop and let's start thinking a little bit more deeply. So rather than just mixing a few things into our landscaping, what if we could wipe away these preconceptions and what have you? And again, back to that idea of a dream garden, a garden that really produces every plant useful. Why plant a tree when you can plant a fruit tree? Why plant a bush when you can plant a berry bush? I love taking a plate and going out in the backyard and making a salad for our dinner meals. It is so nice. Go ahead, let's snip a couple different lettuces. Let's put just a little bit of French sorrel on it. Let's just see, what looks good, what's going on out there. And then put a little vinegar on it. I just love that. And you know, why is every house not a grocery store? Why is every backyard or front yard not a grocery store? And again, not just a grocery store, but a grocery store that looks wonderful. So let's stop and let's kind of, again, try to think a little bit more deeply, and let's actually think about ourselves first. You know, so what is your goal? So you know, the other day, you know, I had my doggy in the back, had my wife along for fun, and I was cruising down the sidewalk in the hot sun, and suddenly this lady snatched me up from behind and dragged me off into her yard and asked me, "Well, what would you plant here?" And I asked, "Well, what do you want to plant?" You know, I started asking her questions. You know, how do you use your yard? You know, this is right in front of a window. Do you guys look out this window? Would you like this window to be a picture frame? You know, just what do you do? And she thought I was being belligerent and difficult. She got mad, put me back on the sidewalk and sent me back on my way. But again, you know, what is your goal? What do you want your garden to be? And then think about the scale and the budget. You know, this doesn't have to cost a lot of money. But how big do you want it to be? You know, how much do you want it to cost? How much time are you willing to put in it? You know, if you have a worky job during the day, you know, it's hard to, you know, really attend to your garden. You know, do you need something that's very low maintenance that you can take care of just after work? You know, how much time do you have? You know, what are your abilities? Are you willing to dig and plant and build and paint? Or, you know, are you willing to pay someone to do that for you? And then how much garden experience do you have? And nothing is sadder than, you know, talking to someone, they just really put a lot of work into a garden and it just didn't work out. You know, they just didn't know what they were doing. They made a lot of mistakes and they really worked hard, tried hard, and just didn't get very far. How much gardening experience do you have? You need a little bit. And then again, you know, the city and the HOA, HOA. Again, I get letters from them most months about just different things, stuff in the driveways, just whatever. For the most part, like I said, they don't know what you're doing, you know, and in the backyard where they can't see it, you know, I feel like all restrictions are off. But in the front yard, you know, last thing you want them to do is, you know, come and have you, you know, order you to dig up a tree or something because you didn't have permission to put it there. So got to navigate those guys. Stop and think about whether or not you're willing to do that. And then let's stop and think about not just ourselves, what we're willing to do, but what do you actually need? I mean, again, you know, we don't want to just dream up a yard that's beautiful, you know, a yard that's got some seating areas and what have you. You know, if you simply don't go outside to sit or what have you, then why have such a thing? Now, personally, I want a gathering area. When friends come over, I want to be able to go outside. So that kind of implies I need some kind of a patio. Especially in the summer, there needs to be some kind of shade. It'd be nice if I didn't have to build a pergola. Is there some way that I can, you know, have something grow and create shade for me? In that same spot, it'd be nice if that spot got, you know, some winter sun. We grill a lot, my wife and I, so we need some place for our grill to be. My wife wants a comfy spot. She made it clear, like early on, she wants a place where she can go sit and read, you know, a very nice, comfortable chair. You know, I want my gardens, I want all my herbs and my vegetables, but I also want, you know, larger crops as well. You know, my fruit trees and corn, these are all things that I want. I also need a work area around the corner where my wife can't see the mess that I'm making. I want clean and clear pathways. You know, nothing bugs me more than I'm out, you know, going to check the chickens or whatever it is and step in a spot, you know, and you slip because it's gotten all squishy from the rain and the leaves were slippy and what have you. I want clean and clear pathways where I can walk nicely. Running space for the dog. You know, we've got dogs on, you know, 3 sides of us, our back neighbor as well as our side neighbors. And my dog is a running dog. She wants to go out there and run up and down the fence with her friends. You know, how about if I kind of design in, you know, a little pathway for her there so she's not running through my garden and what have you. And again, I want this to be all as low maintenance as possible. You can go online and you can Google some checklists, and it's really nice. Some of these checklists are 3 and 4 pages long, things that, you know, perhaps you hadn't thought of or what have you, you know, types of areas, but you really want to think about what you want, you know, out of this garden, out of your backyard, out of your front yard, and then we can kind of start to Tetris those items together, right? No point in building something that you don't want, won't use. Let's think about what you do use so that we can get you what you want. Now, once we kind of, talk about what we're willing to do, what we'd like to have, climate is one of the topics that comes up first. The Great Ice Age of February 2021 was fairly convincing. Froze a bunch of my citrus trees.
Let me interrupt you there real quick if I could, Benny. We had a question come in talking about like planning for your yard. Are you aware of any software or programs that might be available? Like I know there's for design purposes, if you put in the parameters of your yard and, where your house is, what you might want to plant there. Do you know if there's any that are more specific for edible landscaping?
There are a lot of software packages that will help you draft your yard. They have little icons for plants and what have you, and you can lay out a grid and draw your house and put things on the yard. I don't know of any of them that will really make suggestions for you. There is one online service, I think it's called growveg.com, that it's kind of very garden oriented. You kind of define your garden and beds and what you want in the beds, and it'll help you generate rotation plans. But it's just very garden oriented. It's not really like a holistic landscaping thing. So no, off the top of my head, I don't. Sorry.
That's right. And we did have one book recommendation. Joyce recommended a book by Bree Arthur called Edible Landscaping Books that she talks about some HOAs in there. I don't know if you're familiar with that book or if you give recommended as well.
There's one book that we'll get to towards the end. It's called Edible Landscaping by Rosalind Creasy.
Okay.
And she's the lady that coined the term. I think it was in the 70s, and she came out with a couple editions. I think the most recent edition was about 10 years ago, but that book is a dream. Awesome. Number one, just to flip through the book and just to get some ideas is absolutely wonderful. And then the second half of the book is an encyclopedia that tells, all about each plant by plant. What sun does it want? What moisture does it want? Even some suggestions how to use it in the kitchen. So I don't know the book that you mentioned, but the Rosalind Creasy one is my favorite.
We'll look forward to hearing about it. All right, well, let's get back to it.
All right. So back to climate. I think most gardeners or people who have dabbled in gardening know that we're divided up into hardiness zone. Most of you will probably be in hardiness zone 9B. I believe that they recently redrew the hardiness zones, I think in response to some of these freezes that we had in the last couple of years. The Great Ice Age of February 2021 and then the refreeze of 2022. So you might double check what zone you're in these days. Like I said, there is a new map out there. But the reason that we want to check these things is, again, I'm tired of replacing citrus trees. I'm tired of replanting things that froze. So let's be honest, not just about the summer heat. We all know about that. We know it gets hot in the summer. But let's be honest about how often it freezes. For some reason, people here in Houston kind of forget. You go several years and you have just a couple light freezes and you think you're going to get away with it. And then bam, you get one of these crazy freezes. You know what? That's not just a one-time thing. It's not just a rarity. If you look back over the last 100 years, every 8, 10, 15 years at the very most, we have these mean freezes that kill lots of things. So how about if we start choosing plants and trees that survive freezes? In fact, specifically, to the topic of, low maintenance, no maintenance, I've switched to a lot of pit fruit trees, nectarine, peaches, things like that. And this past year, I did nothing to protect my backyard from the freezes. I used to do all these tricks, put little PVC hoops over the garden beds and put row cloth and plastic and wrap the trees and all kinds of things. This past year, I decided that, if they don't make it, then they don't get to be here. And I have every single plant in my backyard coming back up. I did not lose a single tree, did not lose a single plant. Yes, like on some of the plants, the tops froze. I chopped them off as part of my spring cleanup. Put them in a plastic bag, and then all that stuff is resprouting back. So I'm not buying plants this year. I'm not replanting plants this year. So I was able to do all my spring prep in the backyard in probably about 2 hours, just snipping brown leaves off things, putting them in a trash bag. My garden is planted. My yard is growing. And again, these are all edibles. Rain, we got to be honest about rain. I know they talk about, rain, 6 inches of rain every month, but, last summer shook that idea out of me pretty well. You got to have some kind of a watering system in place. Again, I like soaker hoses. Yeah, with some of these hurricanes and things, you know what, we might average 6 inches a month, but the rain here in Houston is just too sporadic. It'll go, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, hot temperatures with basically no rain. You got to have something in place. While we're stealing ideas from permaculture, a lot of times, a lot of permaculture groups want to talk about wind and what have you. And it's just not a big thing here in Houston. Yes, during the summer, we do get a lot of moist air from the south coming up from the Gulf and what have you. But, Houston, if you don't like what you got, wait an hour and the wind will blow a different direction, especially in other types of the year. So, a lot of places in permaculture, they're busy talking about wildfires and how the wind will affect things like that. That's just not a topic here. So wind, you can kind of mark that off your list of considerations. Back to temperatures. So again, on these trees, this is a little chart that I made. This is not anything from the Harris County Master Gardeners. And you'll see that this is, it's not even complete. There's some cells that are blank. But when I was kind of replanning my backyard, thinking about what kind of trees are going to survive here without me having to baby them along and cover them up and do all kinds of tricks, you can see that certain types of trees are easily able to handle that cold. Some of them can, some of them can't, but things like, persimmon trees are good down to 5 degrees. So I now own some persimmon trees. Peach trees down to 15 degrees. I think that number really should be even lower, but they're rated to at least 15 degrees. I now own 4 peach trees. Nectarine trees, I've got 5 nectarine trees. My mulberry tree, I've got a Pakistan mulberry tree, good down to 8 degrees. So no more of this stuff about worrying about my citrus trees, rapid trees. Like I said, as we work on our edible landscaping, let's really make this low maintenance, things that are going to survive on their own. And towards helping them survive, let's stop and let's kind of think about where we're going to place them in the yard. If you kind of make a map of your house and kind of think about, well, for starters, how does the water flow around your house? Most houses are pretty simplistic. Most of them have been leveled, were leveled when the house was built. Most people don't live on large properties that have stream or contours. So for the most part, your backyard kind of drains around your house towards the street, and then your front yard drains into the street. Back to, where does the sun come up? Where does the sun go down? Again, everybody knows, sun comes up in the east, goes down in the west. But let's kind of stop and let's think about, well, exactly where is that morning sun? If you've got, your house is not a perfect square, exactly where is that morning sun and what shadows does your sun cast? And it kind of becomes important because, of course, the sun doesn't, do the same arc in all seasons. In the winter, the sun comes up in the east, goes down in the west, but it makes a low arc across the southern sky. And then that arc, every day gets a little bit higher, a little bit higher, a little bit higher until you finally get to the spring equinox. That's where your day and night are the same length for that one day, right? The winter nights or the winter days have been getting longer. Those winter nights have been getting shorter, and at the equinox, they're the same length. And then, of course, the sun keeps getting higher and higher and higher up to the summer solstice, where you're going to have the shortest shadows and the most sun in your yard. Now, if the sun is always changing, how are you supposed to know? Well, where is my sun? Where is it not? You know what? The spring equinox, which happens to be today, darn, that's a stroke of luck. What that means is, ideally, what you would do is you would go out each hour, maybe starting at about 8 a.m., go out once an hour, take a picture of your front yard, backyard, and each side yard, and keep those as records, because the spring equinox, that's kind of your average sun for the year. And, a lot of people think that they know where the shadows are around their house. You might think but you know what? Even I get surprised. I do this every 5 or 6 or 8 years. And, I've got neighbors who are growing their shade trees, and I've got an oak tree behind us. Where is your sun and shade really at? This is the perfect time to, like I said, take some pictures and just understand, where do your shadows fall and where do they not? And what that'll let you do is that'll let you kind of say, well, my front yard faces sort of west. If you look at the compass rose in the top right, you see that my house actually sits at kind of a 45-degree angle. So lots of hot, dry sun in the front yard, lots of hot, dry sun along the back fence. And then the rest of the areas get partial sun as we go through the day. Close to my house, we get nice morning sun. There's some shadows from the fences, but nice morning sun. And then, like I said, sun moves around the south side of the house. And then, of course, hot during the afternoon and evening. In permaculture, a lot of times they'll kind of draw that same map as what they call a sector compass. And if you kind of imagine standing in the center of this and kind of turning, slowly turning 360 degrees, and just seeing in each of the directions, what are the things that influence, your sun, your water, your view, any of those things. We want to take all those into account. And then here, I want to make a little detour from permaculture. Normally, the next step on permaculture is they would have you design or divide your property up into zones. And zones are all about utility. Where is your garden going to be? Where is your orchard going to be? Just, how are you going to use each piece of land? But I would deliberately use a different terms. Let's call it rooms instead. Because again, we're diverging from permaculture here because we want to talk about aesthetics. I don't just want a backyard that has good utility. I want it to look nice as well. I consider the different areas in my backyard to be kind of like rooms in the house, and I want to decorate them with edibles in the same way that you might decorate a room in the house. And plus, a lot of people, they really kind of get stuck on the creative aspects of this. And if instead of talking about zones, if we talk about rooms, it kind of helps you understand and expect what might be in that room. If you were going to decorate a bedroom, well, as soon as I tell you bedroom, you have some expectations. There's going to be a bed and probably a couple dressers and some nightstands, and already you can start thinking about how you might shuffle them around. If we use the word zones, well, what does that mean? What are the restrictions? If we look at our yard as being like a big outdoor room or a collection of outdoor rooms, it helps us imagine, if I want a hot tub in a certain area and I want to surround it by edibles, well, already you've got some mental picture of what that might look like, and you can start refining that idea from there. So with my house, I divided the outdoor areas up into basically, again, what I'm calling rooms. And, back to that needs survey, I need a place where, we go out the back door and gather and sit and have shade in the, shade in the summer and sun in the winter. I need, a table back there. I want it to look nice. I do need a spot for my garden. I do want an orchard. I want a place for larger crops. I want a work area. And I can, again, by thinking about these things as rooms, I can kind of break it down and kind of start thinking about how each of those rooms might look. And again, it's the creative part that I think people have the most trouble with. There's a good video on YouTube. It's a bit simplistic, but the name of the video is Convert Your Garden into Any Garden Style. And the lady kind of looks at different landscaping styles as being on a sliding scale. And on the left, you can see in the picture, there's like a natural style, just kind of wild-scaped. Next over, she's got a cottage garden where the flowers are in beds, but the beds just really kind of dominate the area. Traditional, there's a lot more structure. You want to do something modern that really has just kind of a minimalist look. What do you want to do? I think it's only a 5 or 10 minute video, but it really kind of helps you put your finger on that sliding scale. Now, I do think that she is oversimplified. I think there should be more of maybe a dozen or 15 different landscaping styles, but to have them on a sliding scale helps you put your finger on where on that scale do you want to be, and then you can start looking other places for inspiration. And here's that book that I had mentioned, John. This is the Rosalind Creasy book. I love just even flipping through this book. Even on the cover, you can see, here's a fantastic idea for a patio. So you know what? You can take something like this, make a list of plants you like, and start laying out a patio for yourself. right? You don't have to start with a blank page and somehow imagine this stuff out of nowhere. You can go and seek inspiration in the same way that landscape designers do it. They don't start with blank pages. They have all sorts of catalogs of templates that they build on, and you should be able to do the same. Find something that you like and build that into your front yard or backyard. Other great places, Pinterest. That's kind of a rabbit hole, though. You click on pictures and it never stops. Lots of good YouTube channels. The Distinctive Gardener, he doesn't have a lot of videos, but his designs are just classy. When you see his designs, they are just places that you want to be. And that's how your garden should be. And as we kind of work on these creative aspects, a few things to keep in mind is, number one, make your garden interactive. Your garden shouldn't be something that you walk out and look at and, yep, there it is. Put a nice bench where you can go out and sit. Like we have a bench. It's kind of I guess it's on the morning side of the house. The bench faces a big mound of red lantana and a couple of nectarine trees. And all the butterflies and everything come to the lantana, so you can sit in the bench and look at that lantana. It's absolutely beautiful. It's in the shade most of the day, so very comfortable. And my wife and I discovered that hummingbirds were coming there. I grew up in Houston, and hummingbirds are just not the kind of thing that you see real often. So we're absolutely fascinated. And it kind of got to the point where we were both rushing home from work to get to the bench to sit there and just talk about our day and watch the hummingbirds and argue about whether it was, the same two hummingbirds every day, or was, it's different hummingbirds. Just what was it? Just, our garden became a place that we wanted to be, and there was something to do. And, back to the idea of the bench with, the lantana, deliberately create scenes. Think about where people will walk. Where will they sit? And when they sit, what are they looking at? Are they looking at a fountain? Are they looking at a nice bed with lots of color? Give them something to look at, not just, stuff in a square. And in that bed, there's probably going to be some kind of focus, something with a lot of color. In container gardening, they always talk about thrill, fill, spill. You put your big your big thriller plant in the center, cover it with fillers, and then put little vines that will spill out. Do the same things in your garden beds. Put something, what is your, the most colorful fruit tree or most colorful edible? Put that in the middle and surround it by other things that have color as well. And of course, you can never have too much color. A lot of flowers are edible, dianthus and what have you. There's a whole list. You can Google them. Nothing wows your guests more than, number one, giving them a plate and sending them out the back door to go pick their own salad for the meal. And then when the meal is served, you put a nice vinaigrette on the salad or whatever, and then sprinkle some flowers, some dianthus. That will just, their heads will explode. Most people don't know that some flowers are edible, and it's absolutely beautiful. To pick something that came from your backyard that is absolutely gorgeous is just such a treat. Add some interest, perhaps a little bit of tasteful yard art or what have you. As you do your stuff, avoid too much symmetry. If you lay things out like the Garden of King Louis, the whatever in France, if one item dies, it's very easy to see that there's a hole there. So too much symmetry is a bad thing.
Real quick, if I can interrupt, Benny, I had a question talking about, obviously sunlight is the premium for most of your edible landscaping. Is there a place where we can see a list of, like, let's say you have a lot of shade, or you happen to be, maybe your neighbor's got, some of those giant, magnolia or pine trees that are just, which are great for keeping your house nice and cool, but, maybe limiting what you can grow.
For this presentation, I think the best list is probably back up top. I've got some other plant lists coming further down, but they're kind of more sorted by size.
Okay.
When we get to that size list, again, this is the one that we were talking about. This got them sorted by, sun and water. When we get to the other list, I'll try to specifically point out some plants that like sun and some like shade.
Sounds good. And that brings up the other thing. A lot of people were asking, is this going to be available? The presentation, the PDF that you put together, going to be available? And yes, we already put a link in there where you would need to cut and paste the link, and we're going to see if we can get a hot link that you can just go straight from there. But the presentation will be available, so you can go back and review those lists. Thank you. People are loving it. Lots of thumbs up and hearts. So keep at it, Benny.
Thank you very much. Let me jump ahead a little bit. So with that in mind, this was my initial draft plan that I came up with. And part of what you want to do, position your big items first in the sun, moisture areas that they'll be happy in, and then you can surround them, with your smaller items. And I was very big again for maintenance reason. I wanted a lot of fruit trees, so now I've got my Pakistan mulberry tree back in the corner. It actually leans over the neighbor's fence just a little bit, and they tell me how much they love those mulberries. I've got nectarine trees, my orchard along the backyard. I've got actually I've got some banana trees here on this side of the house. Bananas just have a hard time. At some point, I'm going to have to be a man and take my own advice, probably pull those bananas out and put something else. Bananas take a year and a half to produce. But of course, if we have a winter freeze every winter and it freezes them back down to the ground, they're not going to produce. I'm sure I'll get lucky and we'll have an easy winter at some point. But that's just not good utility for the landscaping that I've got in place. I've got my persimmon trees over by the mulberry trees. They get lots of sun. I've got an avocado tree I'm trying. We're going to see if this thing makes it through the winter. It's a Del Rio avocado tree, which is supposed to be good down to 15 degrees. I'll believe it when I see it. So it's actually in a giant, big blue ceramic pot. If it makes it through a winter or two, I'll give it a permanent place in the yard. And then I've got, another nectarine tree, more peach trees and what have you. Again, just big on the pit fruits. Because again, they're very freeze resistant, and will make it through the winter. Permaculture, they usually talk about just really stacking your plants. Once you get your trees in place, well, then what comes next? Your sub canopy and your shrubs and what have you. The HOA is probably going to want you to do something a little bit more conservative. I think you can get your trees in place, no complaints. You should be able to put your edible shrubs in place, your berry bushes and things, your herbaceous. Ground cover, I still have grass in my front yard, but I've pulled all the grass out. I actually didn't pull it out. I covered it with cardboard, a little bit of sand and some leaves. So I no longer have grass in my backyard. I'm using Carapia, which is a Texas native, but not actually edible, as a ground cover. Also using sweet potatoes as a ground cover. I couldn't get away with that in the front yard. Root crops, we've kind of talked about how those will want to be in flower beds. I don't think I could get away with vines, not in my trees, the way that permaculture recommends, but I do have a vine I'll talk about that I'm putting on the back fence. We'll get to that in a sec. Permaculture also talks a lot about guilds. You can Google these. The best thing to do is choose the fruit trees you want and then Google what guilds work well with those fruit trees. And they'll basically tell you, what herbs and edibles would love to be, planted around that fruit tree. So choose your fruit trees first and then Google those guilds. But I mean, look at this picture. If you had this in your backyard, I could never get away with this in the front yard because of, my HOA. But could you imagine this, in your backyard? That's absolutely beautiful. Put a bench back there in some quiet spot, read a book, watch the butterflies go by. I think it's absolutely wonderful. And of course, as we plant things, not all things really have to be edible specifically. Some of them can grow resources. And like comfrey, for example, is a fantastic chop and drop. When it gets, kind of big, kind of bushy, kind of crazy, chop it down or chop it at the ground level and throw the leaves into your other beds. Comfrey is really good at reaching down and pulling up, vitamins and minerals from the soil. And when you chop it and throw that leaves into your other beds, you're basically, fertilizing them, adding compost to them. So really, we're talking not just about edibles, but really even more. Livestock, one of my favorite landscaping things. This is not edible. This is actually African blue basil. If you've ever got some of this, it'll grow into a bush about 3 feet wide, about 3 feet or 4 feet tall. It flowers. My African blue basil is already starting to send up blooms, and it will flower until the first hard freeze. The flowers actually don't make seeds. The flowers are non-viable, but bees will come and they will be on this thing just non-stop. And they won't bother you, won't bite you. They are so intent on gathering their pollen. But why have beehives when you can plant African blue basil and have the bees come, just with no maintenance? Again, back to that maintenance-free idea. I've got chickens as well. I consider them kind of part of my landscaping, part of my fun. That's really getting off into permaculture. Same thing with my aquaponics. I grow a lot of edibles in my aquaponics system. That's again drifting pretty far off into to permaculture. So let's kind of skip over those and get back to landscaping. But with edibles in mind now, let's kind of reimagine those 3 laws of gardening. So we've talked about planting the right things in the right place at the right time. So let's plant the right things that we can eat. So fruit and nut trees, berry bushes, fruiting vines. I'll give you some examples of those in just a few minutes. Let's plant things in the right place, right? We've talked about, observing our sun, our wind, our water, and kind of dividing our yard into rooms that we can decorate with our edibles. And then suddenly planting things at the right time becomes less of a topic. You'll still probably have, maybe tomato plants or something that are kind of seasonal. But, most of my garden is now perennial. Things like French soil, chard, and what have you. You plant them once, and yeah, they might freeze, but they come right back up the next year. Arugulas, bok choys, a lettuce, actually not so much lettuce, but arugula and bok choy, they'll reseed. I didn't even bother to plant them this year. The seeds came up on their own. They're cut and come agains, right? Bok choy and arugula, you can snip some off, throw it in a salad. You leave the rest of the plant there until it blooms. It drops seeds, and the seeds come back up next year. So again, planting the right time is just not much of a topic with me anymore. Most of my edibles came back up from last year, and so I'm not watching the calendar like I used to. And of course, as we decorate, remember, you're not the only person that eats. You're not the only party involved that eats. So butterflies, birds, squirrels, whoever you might want to invite, plant something for them as well, so that they'll stay out of your stuff. Everybody will be the happier for it. Into those plant lists, let's go through here. And most of these things are going to be, most of your, I guess, your fruit trees and your fruiting vines are going to be full sun. Most of your leafy greens are going to be shade. I see, John.
Yeah, real quick. So this is a great place to ask this question. So a lot of or if you're looking at reading about fruit trees and planting them online, it says that you want to plant like 2 different fruit trees of similar varieties so they can cross-pollinate, work together. And, a lot of us are limited in the space that we have. How important is it to plant, to think about that, like planting, plants that are going to help like trees that are going to help each other in the citrus world?
Yeah, you really do want to do some research. And in fact, let's jump back up to my notes. Let's see, it's right here. Number 1, not all trees are self-pollinating. So some trees have to have a friend, or otherwise they won't produce fruit at all. And a lot of trees, if you read the tags on them, they'll tell you, what other types of trees can act as a pollinator. I've actually had trouble in the past. I had plum trees for a lot of years, and the darn things would bloom at 2 different times. They were listed as being, good pollinators for each other, but one would bloom and then the blooms would fall off, and a week later, the other one would bloom. And so this whole thing, just mixing different types of plants, I haven't had good luck with. I deliberately do choose self-pollinating fruit trees, and I do plant different self-pollinating fruit trees around the yard. So I do have that mixture, but I am choosing self-pollinating only.
Great. I just wanted to check on that. Thank you.
Some other research that you want to do is some trees require a certain amount of cold, or otherwise they won't make fruit. Harris County normally gets about 400 to 600 chill hours. Basically, a chill hour is an hour of weather that's below, I believe it's 45 degrees. I'm a little bit further south. I'm actually in Pearland. I'm not actually in Harris County. I'm in Brazoria County. So we get less chill hours. So I'm usually looking for fruit trees that have very low chill hour ratings. Because I have a small yard, I'm very concerned with how big is that tree going to get. I know you can just keep trimming trees back, but that's not always good for the tree. I want the tree to be able to get to its mature size and be healthy. And then of course I want trees that don't freeze. So, a good fruit tree will take 3 to 5 years, to get to maturity and really start producing. So I think you need to do a little bit of research before you plop them in the ground and make sure that you get something that's going to work well for you over the years. All right, we talked about kind of rethinking those the three laws of gardening. So now let's talk about some things that do really well here, some things that are absolutely wonderful. So fruit and nut trees, things like apple trees are very cold resistant. My bananas, haven't had good luck with them. I've only got bananas off them once. Kumquat trees, I know I swore that I was done with citrus, but I've got a little kumquat tree in a big blue ceramic pot, and it just produces like crazy, and it doesn't seem to have a season. Anytime we get a good rain, that thing blooms and starts making more kumquats. And if you're not familiar with kumquats, they're little things like an orange. They're like a little tiny orange about the size of your thumb, very tart, but you can use them just like you would use a cranberry. You can, slice them up, put them on a piece of hot buttered toast, slice them up and throw them into pancakes, slice them up and throw them into muffins, even serve them as garnishes, on the plate along with other things. Loquats are nice because they bloom out of season, right? Most fruit trees bloom in the spring and then they fruit in the fall. These things bloom in the fall and fruit in the spring. And so it's a good alternative food source for bees and what have you when nothing else is blooming. The loquats are doing their things. Make your bees happy. And of course, loquats are quite good to eat. I had one in my front yard for years, and I had a guy from the Middle East come across and ask, hey, can I pick your loquats? I had no idea those things are so yummy to eat, but they're quite good. Again, all your pit fruits will be very cold resistant. Pecans take a long time to produce. Persimmon, very cold resistant. My persimmon trees are little. I haven't actually gotten persimmons off them yet, but I've got high hopes. I'll let you know how it goes. But all fruit and nut trees, all full sun. Bushes and vines. That's a Barbados cherry tree in the picture. They call it a cherry tree. It's really a big scraggly bush. But it's another tree that doesn't seem to have a clear-cut season. Anytime we have a good rain, it blooms and makes cherries. They're not exactly like the cherries you think about at the grocery store, but they're still quite nice, still quite good. Blueberry, full sun. Pineapple guava is very cold resistant. It's not actually a type of guava. Makes a fruit about the size of a golf ball, but very yummy, very cold resistant. I've got one in the ground now and I don't plan to baby it along. I do have a strawberry guava tree. I got to drag that in the winter. Drag it into the garage each winter. I keep it in the driveway. That's not cold resistant. Blackberries, grapes. I do have very good luck with my grapes. My back patio is actually a big trellis that's covered with grapes, and that way in the summer the grapes leaf up and I get my shade. In the winter the leaves fall off and I get my sun. And plus it just looks wonderful. You walk out the back door and there's all this green with these grapes just hanging. It's just this feeling of abundance. I love it. Hardy kiwi. This is supposed to be very cold resistant. I'm growing that this year for the first time. This is a vine. It's described as being a very vigorous vine. Makes a small kiwi. They actually call it a kiwi berry. It makes a thing about the size of a grape that tastes like a kiwi. It doesn't have the thick brown fuzzy skin like kiwis at the grocery store do. But this is supposed to be very cold resistant. I'm growing that on my back fence. We'll see how long the fence lasts with that, but growing that on my back fence this year, we'll see how it goes. All the traditional crops, none of these should surprise you. A lot of these, do need to be replanted and what have you. Any of the leafy greens will be really, really good for your shade areas. Any of the items that make any kind of a fruit or a pepper would prefer to be in the sun. And then, of course, there's lots of ethnic crops. Don't forget your aquatics. There are some aquatics that grow wonderfully. You can take a big flower pot, fill it up with water, and throw a cutting of watercress in there, for example, and it'll go crazy. You don't need to fertilize it. You don't need to take care of it. Just, throw a cutting in the water and you'll have more watercress than you could ever eat. Long beans are really good because they're simply just a better bean. Number one, they look neat because they make, a nice long vine, just like cucumbers do. But they grow these beans that are 2 and 3 feet long, and they taste just like a regular green bean. But you can go pick a couple of those beans and snip them with a pair of scissors, and poof, there's enough beans for 2 people. I said they taste like green beans. They actually have just a little bit more savory of a flavor. So not only are they very easy to grow, look very interesting because they come in both blue and green, but they actually taste better. Some other things like tiger melons. Imagine an orange melon with kind of tiger stripes, white tiger stripes on it. A lot of these ethnic crops are just very easy to grow, look wonderful in the garden, and taste great. Beneficials, we've talked about African blue basils. Remember, some of your clovers and your chop and drops are very beneficial for the things that you grow. No, I'm not going to eat clover. I'm not going to eat my chop and drops. But very low maintenance. They look very nice because most of them bloom in different ways, and they fertilize the edibles that you do have there. And then, of course, my driveway, it kills me that the front 1/3 of my house is, a big concrete driveway with 2 garage doors. So, I've got a lot of big containers that I put in front of the yard. I've actually got a big plumeria that's probably about 8 feet tall and about 8 feet wide. That's kind of my focal point. And I have containers with lots of edibles around there, and edibles, Mediterranean herbs and spices. I even have one container that's for my wife's mixed drinks. It's got all sorts of herbs that you might put into mixed drinks. So don't forget your containers. It's not just your yard that you're trying to landscape. Put some things on the driveway and the patio, make that look nice as well. So in general, again, make a list of the things that you like to eat. Study your sun and your moisture so that you can put the things you like to eat around your house in nice places. And start in some creativity. Get your crayons out. Get the Rosalind Creasy book. If you're going to get any book in gardening, that is the book I would suggest. And then watch some YouTube videos for a little inspiration.
Hey, Benny, I know we're getting low on time, but we did have a question I wanted to get back to. You mentioned the phrase, and I love this, chop and drop. Can you explain kind of what chop and drop plants are?
Chop and drop plant, in fact, comfrey is the perfect example. Again, comfrey has deep roots and it really reaches down. Actually, let's back up for a second. And normally in a forest, you would have trees, and the trees reach down with deep roots and pull up the nutrients, and the nutrients go in the leaves. And at the end of the year, the leaves drop on the ground.
Right.
And so you have this nutrient cycle. So comfrey also has deep roots, and it pulls up the nutrients from deep down below. The nutrients have been washed down. It makes kind of a bush. It'll get a couple feet tall, a couple feet wide, has fuzzy leaves like the ears of a lamb. Whenever it starts getting a little crazy, you'll just take a big knife, a machete, whatever it is you garden with, and just literally chop the whole thing off at ground level. Take those leaves and sprinkle them in your other gardens. All the nutrients that it's pulled up will be in those leaves, so you're fertilizing your other gardens. The comfrey will, next day, it'll start sprouting back, and give it a couple months, it'll be back just like it was. So chop and drops are plants that you grow. Perhaps I should have gotten that shorter definition first. Chop and drops are plants that you grow so that you can chop them and sprinkle them elsewhere as fertilizer. How's that?
Got it.
Shorter.
Got it. Thanks so much. I'll let you keep going. I know we're running short on time, so I'll let you get back to the end there.
Excellent. Okay, I've got where I want to go. If you're going to get any book, get the Rosalind Creasy book. Lots of pictures for inspiration. A big encyclopedia of plants that you can choose from. And of course, as you lay out your landscaping, you're really kind of dabbling into permaculture. Yes, we want it to look nice, but we want it to be very productive as well. And so my favorite permaculture book is Introduction to Permaculture by Bill Mollison. So lots of good resources out there. And if all else fails, you can send in questions and what have you to Ask a Master Gardener. All right. Do you
Wow.
have any questions that we haven't answered in the chat? I know we've run over a little bit. My apologies.
No. It's great. So lots of thoughts on the kohlrabi as a green cover plant that you use. They seem surprised by that, but that sounds good.
I'm sorry. Sorry. Carapia.
I'm
Uh, Kurapia.
got it. And you had a lot of luck with it, huh?
Yes. Yeah, Texas native. You can take cuttings and put them around. It's very nice because, like, while grass grows straight up, so you got to cut it every week, Kurapia kind of vines out. So basically, you don't mow it.
Got it. We do want to mention there's a survey that's in the chat. I don't know if you can cut and paste from this link right here, but there's definitely one in the chat. If you wouldn't mind, we'd love for you to fill out our survey. We appreciate that. Let me look and see any other comments as they're coming in. So many, just lots of great people, really appreciative of all the information and very excited about that. So lots of really good comments. I want to say stay with us for next month, or make sure you join us again for next month. We have gardening in containers, and of course you talked about some gardening containers, and that will be on April 16th. So you want to make sure you set your calendars for that. And of course, please check with the Harris County Master Gardeners website. And also there's tons of great information in there. We have put the link to your presentation in the chat. So if they want to see all the great slides and there was a lot more I know you didn't go over. So if they really want to get an in-depth, they can do that, Benny. And man, Benny, anything you want to leave us with? I mean, there's just so much great information, and we're all I'm excited about getting some going and getting some new plants, getting some new things I can eat.
Dream your dreams and then make it happen.
There you go. Listen, Benny, I hope we get a chance to see you again soon. I don't know if you're going to be maybe filling in for anybody later on in the year. We'll see. I know it's not on the schedule, but you never know. Reminder, April 16th, gardening in containers. And really, I just want to say again, thank you so much for all of your hard work and for such a great presentation. Lots of compliments coming in on the chat. So, Benny, thank you so much, and enjoy dinner tonight.
I will. Thank you very much for having me. Best of luck with everything.